Hi, everyone. It's been a little while since I've done an update, and there are a few things that I really wanted to um, clarify because they're very important at this time. You know, the final um, comments regarding the Department of Energy's adherence to the AOC, when we've learned that they've chosen to not follow and keep their promises, as they have been saying for over a decade. So what we need to do now is really take a close look at what the CAG has done, because the CAG, what they did is they went from neighborhood council to neighborhood council. Now, if we're clear on who the CAG is, so the Community Advisory Group was something that I was the original petitioner on. And the people that run it today were all opposed to the CAG. And as soon as they got involved, they made sure that only people that did not want to clean up were allowed to be part of the CAG. So they've worked very hard to remove all the other voices. And when they did the vote with the West Hills and other neighborhood councils, now mind you, Alec Uzemek not only is the chair of the CAG, but he was also the chair of the environmental committee at the West Hills Neighborhood Council. So he convinced a committee that was actually himself. And what they did is they added the words or the acronym AOC to the top of each choice. So each of the three alternatives that were presented by the Department of Energy were presented as if they were AOC compliant. And that was not true. That was not the case. In fact, they were not AOC compliant. Only one version was. So when they talk about all three or four of these neighborhood councils being in favor of a lesser cleanup, they voted based on false information, a false choice, because they were sold a solution where they were told that all three options were AOC compliant. So then why not choose the least impactful? That makes sense if you're really considering factual concepts, but that is not what happened. Instead, they misinformed the community, and then they used that false assignment of a designation of being an AOC compliant cleanup to misinform those people into voting for being less safe, which I personally do not believe that they would have done had they known what that meant. And so I'm going to show you those choices and what was done. And so we have all of this documented, including the recordings of those actual meetings. So when they are working to undermine the cleanup and talk about how the children, we have 54 children in the surrounding areas with cancer. These are not fake children. These are not made up children. And the very idea that the CAG would spend any time at all trying to undermine or discredit these families is quite, it's shocking, really, because we need to make sure that we are cleaning up the site, not just for ourselves, not just for our kids, but we really need to be thinking about this in terms of making sure that children that we will never meet will be safer in the future. So we need to care more about people that we don't know yet. That is the only way that we can get this right. And demanding that they use proper oversight, proper transparency and outreach, where the voices of the public, the concerns of the public are heard and considered instead of unsaid or diminished or counter-commented by these people that are supposed to be providing a public outreach process. We need better. We need to be able to trust it. And that is why I was part of the $42 million radiation survey that took several years. It was funded in 2009 through the ARRA. What that stands for is the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, which was the stimulus package that was put together and basically reinvigorated the economy in the Obama administration. That also gave us the opportunity to actually know what remains at the site, what still needs to be done. So when we look at their maps, we're not using our maps. We're using the maps that were created by the Department of Energy and EPA. And when we look at what they themselves say is remaining as far as chemical contamination and radiological contamination, it's a non-starter. So the very idea that DTSC could come out with a multi-agency report saying that they couldn't find any radiation, and they did so just days after the Woolsey fire, which, by the way, started on Boeing property. So when we're thinking about the inappropriate influence that Boeing has over the FAA and what we're learning about that criminal investigation, that is very similar to what we've been dealing with here, of unchecked, unregulated discharges of chemical and radioactive contamination that is harmful to human health, harmful to the surrounding environment, and we need better. So I'm really grateful for being able to work. Our community was divided for so long, but now what we're finding, thanks to Melissa and so many of these parents being willing to work and collaborate with all of us so that we can be stronger together and get the solution that we have been fighting for so very long. I'm really excited it's finally going to happen. It doesn't feel like it when we hear what both the Department of Energy and NASA have been doing to undermine it. The Office of the Inspector General report that was just recently published is connected to Abe Weitzberg, who is a federal contractor who coordinated what that report should say in order to launch this investigation. So that was done by the polluters for the purpose of lessening the responsibilities that they have. That's inappropriate, and we should not be accepting it, not for 1 minute. Environmental Legacy Cleanup Act. And the reason that this matters is because Santa Susana is not the only site in California that continues to have problems where the contamination has not been properly addressed. We have Santa Susana Field Laboratory, we have San Onofre, Diablo Canyon, we have Hinckley, California, where chromium-6 affected families, and 20 years after Aaron Brockovich and the lawyers are gone, there's still chromium-6 in the water and new families that are being affected. It's not very different from Flint or East Porterville, California, where over $3.2 billion worth of beef comes out of East Porterville, but yet the people who live there don't have running water. For years, they used to have to take their kids to school early, so 6 in the morning they could shower at school because they didn't have water in their homes. So how can, it's literally half the beef that is consumed by the entire United States that comes out of this little county in California, and yet the people who live there don't have proper, clean, running water. These are some of the legacy sites that we're talking about. Many of them are industrial, like Rocketdyne, Santa Susana Field Laboratory, where it really was the industrial age that caused these issues, but there's more. When we think about Mendocino Redwoods in Fort Bragg, this is where they injected millions of tan oak trees with chemicals, including Agent Orange, and left them dead standing. So there's millions of dead oak trees, a very big fire hazard, and that is basically as a result of wanting to make a redwood plantation out of California forest. So that kind of forestry management is not acceptable. It's not raking, but it is also not something that is sustainable. For years, firefighters have been fighting about this because they know that if this goes up in flames, the toxins and the impacts that will be felt by the surrounding communities will be beyond comparison, really, and just something that we must do everything to possibly avoid. So the other thing that I wanted to mention about the programmatic agreement that DOE put together, and this is part of the record of decision in the Section 106 process of consulting parties, and this is where they're weighing the NEPA balancing criteria of impacts for the cleanup versus impacts of, of the contamination. So one of the things that we learned, one of the whereases in this new agreement says that they went into an access agreement with the Boeing company in 2013 for the purpose of the cleanup, and that access agreement expires in 2020. So since the cleanup never happened, unless that is modified, it will mean that Boeing will no longer be giving access to the Department of Energy to the portion of the site that they have responsibility for cleaning up. So how would that cleanup occur if they don't have access to the site? So that's going to have to be modified, and that is going to have to be shared with the public, because right now that's what it looks like, and that doesn't help us get those promises kept.